I reckon as I look back now at that kind of mid-70s to mid-80s era, it was a little mini golden age of Hollywood, because I think there were a lot of films then that people really connected to in the sense of, this is the person that I want to be. I want to be Han Solo. I want to be Indiana Jones. I want to be an explorer. How do we make archaeology cool? Indiana Jones, that's how. So just a couple of minutes ago, I was reading you a little excerpt from a BBC article I came across a couple of weeks ago that just absolutely captured me. We talked about the headquarters of one of the world's most awe-inspiring field science institutions, whose list of honorary members includes Edmund Hillary, Tenzing Norgay, Charles Lindbergh, Thor Heyerdahl, who did the hand-built balsa wood raft, the Kentucky, Dame Jane Goodall, even James Cameron and Jeff Bezos. It's got a little bit of everybody. And I was saying, do you know what I'm talking about? It's the secret travel club that is not a secret anymore. It is the Explorers Club. And we are going to explore it for the next 15 minutes or so here on It's Just Not Cricket. I'm so delighted that I have the president of the New York Explorers Club on the line from New York as we speak, and I could introduce him to you because his own CV is quite remarkable, but he'll do a better job of it himself.
It's the journey of a lifetime on the award-winning Born to Explore. Celebrate the people, the places, the planet we all share.
Looks like an adventure to me.
Join me, Richard Wiese, for a window to the world.
I told you it was pretty wild.
Okay, let's join him. Richard Wiese, how are you?
I'm fine. Wow, I get to have my theme music coupled in there with Indiana Jones, who was actually based on a member from the Explorers Club, Roy Chapman Andrews.
What?
So Roy Chapman Andrews was a real guy. In fact, he was an explorer during the 1920s. He was shipwrecked in Indonesia. He's the guy who smuggled dinosaur eggs out of Mongolia during a civil war. He was president of the Explorers Club. He had a whip and he had a hat.
No.
And he was a pretty cool guy.
I did not know that. Well, we've started off brilliantly already. You do have your own TV show. You have been an explorer. I imagine, like a lot of us, a bit of Indiana Jones was in your life, and you are now the president of the New York Explorers Club. Richard, it's so good to have you on. I'm not sure if we had 17 radio shows, we could really do justice to the breadth and the depth and the brilliance of the Explorers Club. So give us the potted history, my friend.
Well, the Explorers Club was started in 1904 by, at that time, a bunch of guys trying to be the first ones to the North Pole. And I'll tell you an interesting story. A couple of years ago at our annual dinner in New York City, we're an international organization. We had about 1,500 people. And I asked this question to the audience: who here has been to the North Pole? About 200 people raised their hands. Who'd been to the South Pole? About the same amount of people raised their hands. Who had been on the summit of Everest? And we had about 24 people raise their hand. And then I said, has anybody been to the deepest point in the ocean? And at that time, there had only been 2 people. Now there's more. One of them raised their hand. And then I said, has anybody been to outer space? Then we had about 10 people raise their hand. Anybody been to the moon? And of course, I had at that time Buzz Aldrin raised his hand. So our members have been the first to the North Pole, South Pole, top of Everest, first to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, first to the moon. Even my own father was the first man to solo the Pacific Ocean when he flew from San Francisco to Brisbane, Australia.
And what year was that?
1959. And in fact, he's sort of an old school explorer. He was doing it to earn a little extra money. He had worked for Pan Am at that time. And someone asked him to ferry a plane, and, you know, he did it for a certain amount of money, didn't realize that he had done it, did it under an assumed name so he wouldn't get fired from his job. And I was lucky to have him as my father, and I'm still lucky to have him as my father.
Yeah, he's still going. 1959, the first solo crossing by plane of the Pacific. It is the Explorers Club in New York. So given that you really had very little choice, when you look around at a room like that, a room of people who've been to the moon and the Mariana Trench and the poles and the Everests, are explorers born or are they made?
You know, I think that everybody is born with a certain level of curiosity, and some people were fortunate to have the right mentors or role models in their life that help them, become explorers. For example, my father was an airline pilot, so it was very common for us to stand on any given night, and we still do, and look at the stars. And he started with celestial navigation, so the language we spoke was weather patterns and stars. I have a favorite uncle who's the head of MIT's nuclear physics department, and he was always somebody, always had the time of day to explain things, show me things, introduce me to people. And those two men are still mentors in my life today, so I was very lucky. But as far as when you come to the Explorers Club, I like to say it's sort of like Hogwarts for adults. You go in there, and there really is magic that people talk about. We had some astronauts in there from the Apollo mission. They were talking about somebody losing a wedding ring and it floating around in outer space, or flying back from the moon by celestial navigation. People will talk about spear points. They'll talk about a trip maybe up to Arnhem and seeing a rainbow serpent on a wall in Australia. So the conversations really are quite extraordinary. And I remember when I first joined, I was just so thrilled to be a member. And so many of my childhood heroes, like Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin or Jane Goodall, were there. And I got to meet them. And that was really cool.
This is very cool. If you're just joining us, this is It's Just Not Cricket, ABC Radio. We are right across Australia. And my guest, what a brilliant subject. A subject so interesting that it so captured my imagination when I started reading about the New York Explorers Club that it's actually going to take us a couple of weeks, I think. We're going to spend a couple of weeks on exploration. We're going to meet the people who run the Australian chapter of the Explorers Club in the next couple of weeks, as well as some great explorers locally as well. But Richard Wiese is the president of the Explorers Club, and I'm delighted to say my guest here on ABC Radio. Joining me on the line from New York. When you look around again, I'm just trying to envisage you at the front of that room, and what a buzz that must be for you, and you've got them all there for dinner. What an amazingly disparate bunch of characters I'm sure you all are. Do you find that there are, you use the word curiosity. What would you say are the common threads? Is there one thing that you think everybody in the room shares?
Well, curiosity for sure. There's a plus and minus to it all, because you have to imagine that they're all alpha individuals. These are people who are not shrinking violets. They sit on top of rockets that might blow up, or they've been on Everest. So the men and women there are quite tough, and sometimes from a group dynamic, you just have a lot of very strong personalities in the room. So it's a difficult club to administer, but yes. I would say that that it's just always it's endlessly interesting, even if you're on the receiving end of bad news, or somebody's sharp barbs or vendetta. I mean, my mentor, when I was sort of coming up with the ranks of the Explorers Club, was a guy named Fred McLaren. He was an ex-nuclear sub-captain, and this guy was tough. I mean, he spent his career on the Siberian ice shelf spying on Russians. And so, this guy played for keeps, and I learned a lot from him. And then, there's so many experiences and conversations and approaches to life that I've admired. But I think from the one thing is that whole idea of blue skying things, that nothing is impossible. And just because someone hasn't done it doesn't mean you can.
Oh, wonderful. When you were describing the list of people you had in the room, I actually wrote down on my little notepad here, alphas. And sure enough, you said it yourself. I was wondering what it must be like to work in that environment, and you're painting a great picture. Now, let me just say, it was just ad hoc that I found your club and wanted to talk to you, but this is actually a very interesting day to do it because there's quite a few big Explorer anniversaries happening either today or this week. Let me share some with you. If you're just joining us, you are listening to ABC Radio. This is It's Just Not Cricket, and earlier this week was the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Roger, go at throttle up.
This shuttle mission will launch, my God.
1 minute 15
There's been an explosion.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
This is not standard. This is not something that is planned, of course. I can see a solid rocket booster has broken away from Shuttle Challenger. That's what you're looking at in the middle of your screen.
Oh, that still gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? I was watching an episode of Bewitched in England, and they broke in with breaking news, and it's one of those you never forget where you were moments. Today, another sad anniversary in exploration is the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Columbia, and I found some footage looking at mission control, which is incredibly powerful.
Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check. Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check.
At 9:16, the truth dawned on Mission Control. The space shuttle had been lost.
GC flight. GC flight. Flight GC, lock the doors. Copy.
38 miles above ground, the space shuttle had exploded. All 7 on board were killed.
And that was on this day. Also on this day, in a rather happier piece of exploration news. Now, you heard Richard talk about the fact that there was a real-life Indiana Jones inspiration. I'm sure you knew this. Did you know that there was a real Robinson Crusoe? A Scotsman called Alexander Selkirk. Well, it was on this day in 1709 that he was rescued by an explorer, an English explorer called William Damper. So straight away you get a sense of the tragedy, the courage, the bravery, the foolhardiness, and the incredible stories that come with exploring, and all of that coincidental to the fact that I was desperate to talk to the Explorers Club in New York. President Richard Wiese is my guest. It's, I imagine with all the triumph, there must be tinges of tragedy in 100-odd years of history of the Explorers Club.
Well, I think more than that. I mean, it's on a regular basis that you have people that you know that do die during these type of things. You know, I think one of the interesting things about adventure travel in general, and the Explorers Club is not necessarily about adventure, is that at this time you could literally be anywhere in the world within 24 hours. You could be at base camp at Everest. You could be at the North Pole. And I think that often people get into situations, we've seen this on Mount Everest, where you've got the money and you've got what you think are bulletproof plans, and things go well until they don't. And, you know, back in the day of Shackleton, people went through an apprenticeship of skills, and now it's really, you see people getting into situations that are above their head all the time.
How many, you said there are chapters all over the world. You mentioned that we've got one here, and we'll be speaking to them. How many members, how many chapters? How widespread is the Explorers Club?
Well, you know, we have members on every continent, including Antarctica, and there's approximately 30-something chapters around the world of different sizes. And it's interesting because I think some of the cultural bonds that explorers break down are something that's very necessary today. I think that when someone goes, for example, to an Islamic country and has a meal with a family or sees something cultural or music, dance, art, it breaks down some of those barriers that I think right now the world needs breaking down. So it's not just a science. It's also coming back and, telling the story about a group of cultural people.
It can often be, I think, seem like we've missed the golden age of exploration. Is that an underestimation? Are we living in a great exploration time?
Oh, I think we're living in the greatest exploration time. When we had the Beagle and it did its voyage of discovery off the Galapagos, it was 20 years before Darwin even published his works and in critical conversation with it. Now, with an internet age, the exchange of information is so rapid. We recently, last New Year's, we saw a spacecraft that went past Pluto, Ultima Thule, live pictures, or live as many minutes as it took to get back. I think with the advent of DNA, a lot of the personality or cult of personality has gone out of science, and it's based on hard facts. People are using LIDAR, which is a type of radar, to discover ancient civilizations and structures that would take decades to find otherwise. Scientists are finding new dinosaurs. We're looking further out into space than ever before. So I think we're actually in an age of discovery. Maybe not, you don't have the romantic characters that you once did in the 19th and early 20th century, but man, if you talked about a time of just rapid discovery, now is the time.
I imagine you're a group of people who look ever forward. Is there a one journey, a one exploration that's on everybody's mind? Is there a hot ticket item?
Well, I mean, the most obvious one from an optics stand would be maybe Mars, but I think a lot of explorers are now trying to be more solution-oriented, and that, at least in America, I find science is somewhat under siege, and that people are questioning even what's going on with our environment. And I think you need as many people to step forward as effective communicators, to be advocates of positive solutions, and change the narrative. So I think that is as much on people's mind as any subject I've heard in the last decade.
I can see why you're the president of the Explorers Club, Richard Wiese. It's when we looked to 2020, we never thought we'd be fighting for science, did we? So it's great that amongst the many brilliant stories and incredible adventures that your organization has had, that you are powerful and effective advocates for what is in fact real. I'm sure you have, lists of great frequently asked questions. In fact, I should say, look, just go YouTube Richard Wiese. It's Wiese, and I'll put a link up on our Facebook page. It's Just Not Cricket with Glyn Greensmith. Okay. Born to Explore is his show. He's also done some TED Talks, so you can have go check him out. Go check out the Explorers Club at explorers.org. Why do you do what you do?
Well, in my family, my wife, she's originally from South Africa. When apartheid was over, she went back to South Africa as a young woman, and she wanted to be part of the new South Africa. And so she started something called the Africa Foundation 25 years ago. And so she was genuinely a very socially conscious person. And I think that as I got older, had kids, married her, I started looking at the world differently. It became less about my own personal testosterone or beating the chest up a mountain or saying I've conquered something, to looking around and learning more about cultures and feeling that I could actually make a difference. So from my perspective, it's really a privilege to be president of this organization and be part of change. It's never as easy as it looks, but I feel very strong that it's an example that I'm trying to show my kids, young kids, and that my wife has, and that it's part of our DNA to be socially conscious and try to make the world a better place. This isn't just some sort of line. I feel this truly. Whoa.
Richard, I'm so glad I got hold of you. What a beautiful way to finish. You are eloquent. Your club is extraordinary. If I'm ever in New York, you'll probably find me on the security cameras breaking in just for a little look around, because the Explorers Club in New York sounds
you're welcome. You are welcome. You are welcome to visit anytime.
It sounds like a remarkable place with remarkable people. Thank you for taking some time with us, my friend.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for your intelligence in your interviews. So I appreciate that.
Richard Wiese, explorers.org. Go check it out.